The twin moons of Veros 9 hung high in the night sky, casting a pale, sickly glow over the endless desert. The wind howled through the canyons, carrying with it the distant screams of something dying, human or alien. No one could tell anymore. The Tivaran slaver convoy moved cautiously through the dunes, their repulsor trucks kicking up plumes of dust as they trudged toward the distant trading outpost of Orcs Rest. Cages of reinforced metal rattled with every bump, packed with human prisoners, gaunt, battered, and silent. The slavers barked at them in their guttural tongue, but the captives had long since learned that speaking only earned them another beating. At the head of the convoy, Overseer Krasik sat atop his hover tank, lazily gnawing on a strip of dried Krekhound meat. The Tivaran was a brute, even by his species standards, with a thick, scarred hide and a pair of cybernetic tusks that glowed faintly in the dark. His second-in-command, a lanky insectoid Zethari tracker, approached with a nervous chitter. "There is something in the sands, Overseer," the Zethari rasped. "Something watching us." Krasik exhaled through his nostrils, unimpressed. "More desperate raiders. Ha! Let them try. We are armed, and they are starving." "No," the Zethari's mandibles clicked anxiously. "Not raiders. The ghost." Silence fell. The other slavers overheard the words and stiffened, their reptilian eyes darting toward the darkness beyond the firelight. Even the prisoners tensed. The ghost. For months, slaver convoys had vanished in the night, their remains found days later, shredded bodies, burnt-out trucks, not a single survivor. No one saw the attacker. No one lived to tell the tale. Only the dead were left to whisper his name. The Ghost King. Krasik scoffed. "Ridiculous. Some human rabble-rouser, no doubt. I have 20 men. If he's real, he dies tonight." But the Zethari was already backing away, his eyes darting wildly. "He is already here." Krasik's tusks flared, and he turned to shout an order. Then the lights went out. The repulsor trucks flickered, their engines sputtering. The slavers cursed as their comms crackled with static. A sharp metallic twang echoed through the canyon, followed by a strangled gurgle. A sentry dropped from his perch, a knife buried in his throat. Panic erupted. Slavers drew their weapons, but the shadows swallowed them whole. Another gurgled scream. Another flash of motion. Krasik's eyes darted frantically. "Show yourself, coward," he bellowed. The wind answered. And then, a figure stepped into the firelight. A man, clad in battle-worn armor, draped in the sands of the wasteland. His helmet, scarred and featureless, reflected the flickering flames. A pulse rifle hummed softly in his hands. The slavers opened fire. Plasma bolts screeched through the air. But the Ghost King had already vanished. The smell of burning flesh lingered in the canyon long after the last scream had faded. The wreckage of the slaver convoy lay scattered across the sands. Trucks overturned, bodies slumped in pools of thick, black blood. The Tivarans had been given no mercy. They had fought. They had died. Just like the others. Elias Voss moved among the dead, his footfalls silent against the shifting dunes. The Ghost King was no legend. He was flesh and blood, a soldier of a world long forgotten. His battered exosuit whirred softly as it adjusted to the desert chill, micro-servos compensating for the weight of his armor. The suit was old, patched together from scavenged parts, but it still did its job. The humans in the cages stared at him in stunned silence, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. Some had heard the whispers, the rumors of a phantom who slaughtered slavers in the dead of night. Few had believed he was real. But here he was. Voss moved to the nearest cage and yanked open the lock. A thin, hollow-cheeked man scrambled out, clutching his broken wrist. Who are you?" Voss ignored the question. "You can walk." The man nodded weakly. "Then move, all of you." The other prisoners hesitated before obeying. As he freed more, they stumbled out, some collapsing onto the sand, too weak to stand. Many were injured. Many more were starving. He couldn't save all of them. He never could. A woman stepped forward, tall, lean, with dark eyes that still held a spark of defiance. Unlike the others, she didn't look away when Voss met her gaze. She studied him, then glanced at the corpses surrounding them. "You're the one they talk about," she said. Voss didn't answer. She pressed on. "The Ghost King. The slavers are terrified of you." "They should be," he muttered, checking the charge on his rifle. He was running low. Again. The woman crossed her arms. "I'm Sarah. Sarah Kale." She nodded toward the freed prisoners. "Some of these people can't walk through the wastes. We need food, water, shelter." "Not my problem," Voss said. Sarah scoffed. "You saved them, but you're just going to leave them here." "I didn't come to play hero." He slung his rifle over his back. "The Taverans won't miss this convoy for long. You stay here, you die." Sarah clenched her fists. "So what are we supposed to do?" Voss turned away. He had done his part. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't a savior. He was a soldier, and soldiers fought wars, not rebuilt broken people. Then, in the distance, he saw a faint glow on the horizon. Not the sunrise, a column of dust. More slavers, and they were coming fast. Voss sighed, gripping his rifle once more. Looks like he wasn't done yet. The wind carried the distant roar of engines, a dull thunder rolling across the dunes. More slavers. Voss watched the dust cloud grow, his jaw tightening beneath his helmet. He had expected retaliation, just not this fast. The prisoners murmured in panic. Some collapsed to their knees, too weak to run. They had just been freed, only to face death again. Sarah Kale stepped beside Voss, her expression grim. "We can't fight them like this." Voss already knew that. His ammo was low, and the stolen slaver rifles were cheap Dominion scraps, barely reliable in a firefight. The people behind him weren't soldiers. They were half-starved, wounded, and terrified. If they stood and fought, they'd be slaughtered. That left one option. "We run," Voss said. Sarah frowned. "To where?" "There's a ridge system a few clicks west. Canyons, harder to track us through the rocks." He turned to the prisoners. "Anyone who can walk, move. Anyone who can't, get carried or get left behind." Some hesitated. Sarah didn't. She strode into the group, grabbing a frail old man and hoisting him up. The others, seeing her example, began helping each other. Even as exhaustion weighed on them, they moved. Voss took a last look at the wreckage, bodies still smoldering. No time to strip weapons, no time to set traps. Then he turned and disappeared into the sands. They ran until their legs gave out. The desert stretched endlessly, a vast open graveyard where only the ruthless survived. Behind them, the slavers closed in. Voss guided them into the ridges just as the first speeder bikes crested the horizon. The canyons were sharp, jagged, filled with twisting passages and hidden drops. A death trap for the careless. That worked in his favor. As the group stumbled into a narrow crevasse, Voss scanned the cliffs. Good vantage points, natural choke points. If he played this right, they had a chance. He turned to Sarah. "Get them moving through the pass. Don't stop." She glared at him. "You're staying." Voss checked his rifle. 3 plasma cartridges left. Not enough. He drew a knife from his belt. "That would have to do." "I slow them down," he said. "Buy you time." Sarah's hands clenched. "That's suicide. Only if I die." She stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, with a sharp nod, she turned and led the prisoners deeper into the canyon. Voss stayed behind. The first slaver speeder screamed through the pass. Voss was waiting. He moved fast. A burst of plasma shattered the rider's skull. The bike spun out, crashing in a fireball. The second rider barely had time to react before Voss was on him, knife flashing in the moonlight. One down. More coming. Voss vanished into the rocks. The hunt had begun. The canyon walls shook with the roar of engines. Slaver warbikes tore through the narrow pass, plasma cannons glowing in the dark. The scent of scorched metal and burning fuel filled the air as the first explosion faded into the distance. Voss pressed his back against the jagged rock, blood dripping from his blade. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from calculation. How many? How fast? How long before they find the others? He needed to buy more time. A slaver dismounted near the wreckage of the fallen speeder, barking orders in Tuvaran. 2 more followed, weapons raised, eyes scanning the darkness. They expected an ambush. Good. Voss moved like a shadow. Before the nearest alien could react, his knife found flesh. The Tuvaran choked on his own blood as Voss yanked him back into the darkness. The second slaver barely had time to turn before a pulse round punched through his skull. The third fled. Voss let him. The panic would spread. Fear was his real weapon. The warbikes screeched deeper into the canyon, hunting for prey. Voss kept moving. Silent. Unseen. Deadly. Farther ahead, Sarah Kale led the survivors through the twisting pass. The injured stumbled, their breath ragged. There was no time to rest. The canyon's end loomed ahead, but so did a new problem. The terrain opened up into a wide, barren valley. No cover, no concealment. If the slavers caught them here, they were dead. Sarah clenched her fists. They needed a miracle. One of the prisoners, a former miner named Hall, gasped, pointing toward the far cliffs. "I know this place," he wheezed. "There's an old Federation bunker, buried in the rock." Sarah's eyes widened. A bunker. If it was real, they had a chance. "Where?" she demanded. Hal coughed, pointing north. "Half a mile. But it's been sealed for decades. Even if we find it, we'll never get inside." Sarah turned to the weary group. They had no choice. "Then we make it inside," she said. "Move." Voss ran. He had stalled the slavers, but not for long. The ones that survived would regroup, hunt him down. He needed to disappear. As he crested a ridge, he spotted the group vanishing into the cliffs. He saw Sarah leading them toward what looked like a rockslide. Then he saw it. Beneath the rubble, jagged edges of old, rusted metal. Faint markings. Earth Federation insignia. Voss exhaled sharply. It was real. A hidden weapons cache. A dead empire's forgotten arsenal. And now, it was his. Plasma bolts screamed past him. The slavers had found him. Voss gritted his teeth. Good. Let them come. They had no idea what he was about to unleash. The slavers were closing in. Engines howled in the distance. Plasma bolts screeched through the air. And the scent of burning ozone filled Voss's lungs. The canyon walls funneled sound in every direction, making it impossible to tell how many enemies were out there. It didn't matter. He had no intention of fighting them out in the open. Ahead, Sarah and the survivors reached the rockslide. Buried beneath was salvation. An Earth Federation bunker, untouched for decades. "Find a way in," she barked at the others. Hall and a few others dug feverishly at the rubble, their hands blistered and raw. The heavy metal doors beneath the rock were warped with age, their control panel dead. "We're locked out," Hal gasped. "The system's fried." Sarah turned, breathless. Voss. But he was already there. Without a word, he dropped to one knee, prying open the corroded access panel with his knife. Wires spilled out, old, rusted, but still intact. Sarah hovered over him. "Tell me you can hack this." Voss didn't look up. Not hacking. Bypassing. He ripped a power cell from a fallen slaver rifle, stripped the casing, and jammed it into the panel. Sparks flew. The bunker's emergency systems flickered. A deep, guttural thud rumbled beneath them. The ancient doors groaned, and then they slid open. For the first time in decades, the Federation stronghold breathed again. Inside. "Now," Sarah shouted. The survivors poured into the darkness. Voss was the last one through. Behind him, slaver warbikes screamed down the canyon, their riders spotting the bunker entrance. One aimed a plasma lance. Voss put a bullet through his skull. The Tiveran tumbled from his bike, crashing into another at full speed. Voss slammed the bunker doors shut just as plasma fire tore through the air. The slavers skidded to a halt, snarling at the sealed entrance. They were too late. Inside, the survivors slumped to the floor, panting. Some sobbed in relief. Others simply stared into the dark. Sarah turned to Voss. "What is this place?" He exhaled, scanning the massive chamber ahead. Dust-covered consoles, rusted racks of weapons, dormant battle drones standing like sentinels. "A war vault," he muttered. "And it's ours now." Sarah's eyes widened. "You mean?" Voss moved deeper inside, brushing a thick layer of dust off a nearby console. Beneath the grime, faded words gleamed in the dim light. PROPRTY of the HE Earth Federation. Weapons Division. Authorization required. A slow grin spread beneath Voss's helmet. This wasn't just a bunker. It was an armory. And with it, he would build an army. Outside, the slavers pounded against the sealed doors, screaming for blood. Inside, the Ghost King prepared for war. The slavers were coming. Outside the bunker, the Tiveran warbands had gathered in force. Dozens of warbikes, repulsor trucks bristling with plasma cannons, and savage warriors eager to tear the Ghost King apart. Their leader, a scared brute named Karek Bloodtaker, snarled as his forces pounded on the sealed doors. "Bring the breachers," he roared. "We rip this tomb open and gut the humans inside." The survivors huddled in the darkness, listening to the hammering against the thick steel. They had no way out. Sarah paced anxiously. "We're trapped. If they breach the doors, we're dead." Voss wasn't listening. He stood before the bunker's command console, fingers flying across the controls. Earth Federation security systems were ancient, but not dead. The bunker had power, just enough. Weapons crates hissed as they unlocked, revealing pulse rifles, shock grenades, and sleek combat armor lined with Federation insignias. Then, the real prize. With a final keystroke, a row of dormant battle drones hummed to life. Their photoreceptors flared red as servos whirred, combat protocols awakening after decades of silence. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Arthos." Voss turned, his helmet reflecting the flickering console lights. "Soldiers," he said. "Time to wake them up." Outside, Karek's demolition crew set plasma charges against the bunker doors. Sparks flew as they worked, the scent of burning metal thick in the air. A nearby scout's comm unit crackled. "Overseer, we intercepted a transmission. Encrypted, human frequency." Karek bared his fangs. "The Ghost King is calling for help. Let him. There's no one left to save these filth." The slavers roared in laughter. Then, the doors slammed open. From the darkness, Voss stepped out. "Alone." Karek sneered. "So, the Phantom decides to face us like a warrior." He raised a massive blade. "I will enjoy carving you apart, human." Voss didn't answer. Instead, he raised his hand. A sharp mechanical whine filled the air. The slavers' laughter died. The bunker awoke. Gun turrets unfolded from the walls. Battle drones stepped forward, their pulse cannons charging. The once broken slaves, now clad in scavenged Federation armor, raised weapons once wielded by Earth's fallen warriors. For the first time in years, humans stood armed against their masters. The Ghost Army had risen. Voss's voice was calm, cold, deadly. "Run." The slavers hesitated. Then the killing began. The drones opened fire, cutting through the first wave of warriors. Plasma turrets ripped apart warbikes before they could retreat. The humans, once beaten and weak, fought like demons, driven by vengeance and the taste of freedom. Karek roared in fury, charging Voss with his blade raised high. Voss met him head-on. The Ghost King was not done yet. Carrick charged like a beast unleashed, his massive blade gleaming under the twin moons. Plasma fire and smoke filled the battlefield, but the only thing Voss focused on was the warlord barreling toward him. Voss sidestepped at the last second. Carrick's blade slammed into the ground, kicking up a spray of molten rock. The Tivaran was strong, too strong to take head-on. But strength meant nothing without control. Voss moved with precision. A pulse knife flicked from his wrist, slicing across Carrick's arm. The warlord snarled, swinging wildly. Too slow. Voss ducked, landing a brutal elbow to Carrick's ribs. The warlord staggered. Then Voss went for the kill. He drove his knife toward Carrick's throat. But the Tivaran caught his wrist. Bones creaked under Carrick's monstrous grip. The warlord grinned, tusks bared. "I expected more from the Ghost King," he sneered. With a roar, he hurled Voss backward. Voss slammed against a wrecked warbike, armor plates crunching from the impact. His vision blurred, but he forced himself up. No time for pain. The battle was still raging. The Ghost Army fought like men possessed. Sarah led the charge, pulse rifle barking as she cut down a Tivaran warrior. The once broken slaves fought with fury, with vengeance. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were winning. The Federation battle drones mowed down the slavers with ruthless precision. Turrets tore through enemy ranks, leaving twisted corpses in their wake. A warbike tried to flee. Sarah shot out its engine, sending the rider crashing into the sand. Another slaver raised a plasma cannon. Hall, the old miner, smashed his skull in with a salvaged combat hammer. For the first time in decades, humans were not prey. Carrick stomped toward Voss, blade raised. "I will rip your skull from your body and mount it on my throne." Voss, still dazed, gritted his teeth. He needed a weapon, fast. His fingers brushed against something cold, a fallen soldier's belt. A grenade. Carrick swung. Voss rolled away, yanking the pin. The warlord lunged. Voss shoved the grenade into his open mouth. Carrick's eyes went wide. Voss kicked him backward. The warlord barely had time to react before his own head detonated in a shower of gore. The Ghost King rose to his feet. The battlefield fell silent. The remaining slavers saw their leader's headless corpse collapse. Their will shattered. They ran. Sarah stepped beside Voss, breathless, her rifle still smoking. "They're retreating." Voss exhaled, watching the survivors flee into the night. Not a victory. A warning. He turned to the freed humans, their eyes filled with newfound fire. They weren't prisoners anymore. They were soldiers. And this war had only just begun. The battlefield still smoldered. Wrecked warbikes lay scattered like broken bones, the scent of charred flesh thick in the cold desert air. The slavers had fled, leaving only corpses and shattered weapons in their wake. For the first time in years, humans had won. Voss stood at the center of it all, silent, watching, not celebrating, not mourning, just observing. The survivors, no, the soldiers, gathered around him. Their hands still trembled, their bodies still weak from starvation and slavery. But in their eyes, something had changed. They had killed their oppressors, and they weren't afraid anymore. Sarah approached, blood staining her armor. "We did it." Voss didn't answer immediately. He turned his gaze to the bunker, their new stronghold. Inside, stacks of Federation weapons lay untouched, a forgotten arsenal of a dead empire. Slowly, he exhaled. "Not yet." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" This was a skirmish. He looked toward the horizon, where the Tivaran forces had retreated. The real war hasn't started. Sarah clenched her fists. "Then we make sure we're ready." Voss met her gaze. She understood now. She wasn't just fighting to survive. She was fighting to win. He turned to the gathered warriors. "You were slaves." His voice carried through the canyon. Strong, cold, certain. You were broken, beaten, left to die in chains. They listened, eyes locked on him. No more. Silence. This wasteland belongs to no one. Not the Tiverans. Not the Dominion. It belongs to those strong enough to claim it. His voice grew sharper. You stood here tonight and proved one thing. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. Humans do not kneel. A murmur ran through the crowd, a whisper of agreement. Voss continued. The slavers will return. Stronger, angrier. They think we're weak, that we're nothing more than prey. His eyes burned beneath his helmet. They are wrong. Now, the murmur became a roar. Voss stepped forward. We do not hide. We do not beg. We fight. His voice was iron. Tonight, we take our first step. Tonight, we build something stronger than chains. He raised his rifle. Tonight, we forge a kingdom. The survivors, no, the warriors, erupted in cheers. Sarah smirked. I never took you for a king. Voss finally looked at her, his voice lower now. I'm not. He turned back to the battlefield, scanning the wreckage. They had won a battle. But war was coming, and when it did, the Ghost King would be ready. The desert wind howled through the canyons, carrying the scent of blood and burning wreckage. Night had fallen, but there was no rest. Not yet. Inside the bunker, the survivors, now warriors, armed themselves with Federation weapons. Pulse rifles, shock grenades, battle armor stripped of its faded insignias. They moved with quiet determination, sharpening blades, checking power cells, reinforcing defenses. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were soldiers preparing for war. Voss watched them work, his helmet resting on a crate beside him. His body ached. His mind didn't. Sarah stepped up next to him, crossing her arms. You should get some rest. Voss didn't look at her. I will. You keep saying that, she muttered. He finally turned. So do you. She smirked but didn't argue. Instead, she nodded toward the growing army. They're ready to fight. Voss exhaled. They think they are. Sarah studied him. You don't. They'd won one battle, he said. That's not the same as winning a war. Sarah considered that. Then we make sure they're ready. Voss didn't answer. He had already been thinking about it. The slavers wouldn't take this defeat lightly. The Tivaran warlords would regroup, call for reinforcements. And when they came back, they wouldn't come as raiders. They'd come as an army. A war was coming. And if they wanted to survive, they needed more than weapons. They needed strategy, fortifications, supply lines, an actual command structure. They needed more soldiers. Voss turned to Sarah. There are others out there. She frowned. What do you mean? Other slave camps, he said. Other prisoners. Other fighters. He picked up his helmet. We free them. We bring them here. Sarah's eyes flickered with understanding. You're building an army. A kingdom, Voss corrected. One strong enough to burn the slavers out of this wasteland for good. Sarah let out a slow breath. You really think we can win? Voss looked around. At the battered but determined faces, at the pulse rifles gleaming in the dim bunker light. He thought about the Earth Federation. Long gone, their empire turned to dust. But their weapons still worked. Their war machines still obeyed. And now, their ghosts fought again. Voss met Sarah's gaze, voice steady. We're going to do more than win. He slid his helmet back on, the visor glowing faintly in the dark. We're going to make them afraid. Outside, the desert lay quiet. For now. But soon, the Ghost King's army would rise, and the wasteland would burn. The wasteland was never silent. Even in the dead of night, the wind whispered through the dunes, carrying echoes of old battles and forgotten empires. But tonight, it carried something new. A warning. Atop the highest ridge overlooking the canyon, Voss stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The sand stretched endlessly before him, broken only by the faint flicker of distant fires. Tivaran war camps. The slavers were gathering. Their scouts had returned. Their leaders had whispered of an uprising. They had seen the Ghost King and his warriors turn the hunted into the hunters. And now, they were coming to crush him. Voss felt no fear, only cold certainty. He had expected this. Footsteps approached. Sarah. She stopped beside him, staring at the same fires in the distance. How long? Voss didn't look away. A day, maybe less. She inhaled sharply. We're outnumbered. We always were. Sarah glanced back at the bunker below. Their fortress. Their only chance. The survivors had spent every hour reinforcing it, turning rusted walls into battlements, plasma turrets into sentinels. The stolen Federation war machines have been activated, their targeting systems humming with new purpose. Drones patrolled the perimeter, scanning the desert for movement. And inside, the warriors prepared for battle. They were no longer slaves, no longer afraid. Sarah turned back to Voss. You think they're ready? He finally looked at her. They don't have to be. She frowned. What do you mean? Voss's voice was quiet. I am. A moment of silence. Then Sarah smiled, shaking her head. Damn, you actually believe we can win? Voss turned back to the horizon. The slavers thought they were marching to victory. They had no idea they were marching into hell. He lifted his rifle, the glow of the bunker's defenses reflecting off his visor. They wanted to meet the Ghost King, he murmured. He chambered around. Let's not disappoint them. Dawn broke over the wasteland. The Tivaran warbands came in force. Dozens of warbikes, armored crawlers, gunships screaming across the sky. They expected an easy slaughter. Instead, they found death waiting. The first warbike never made it past the ridge. A Federation railgun tore it apart in a single shot. Drones rained fire from above. Pulse turrets ripped through enemy lines. The warriors, once broken, once enslaved, fought like demons, their stolen weapons tearing through their former masters. The slavers screamed, realizing too late. The Ghost King had laid a trap. And Voss was already in the thick of it. A blade in one hand, a rifle in the other, he moved through the chaos like a specter, silent, deadly, unstoppable. The battle would rage for hours. But by the end, only one side would remain. And the wasteland would never be the same again.